This piece, entitled Quiet One, is a work from contemporary artist Rick Bartow. Currently on display at the Portland Art Museum in their Native American art collection, it is just one of many stunning paintings from Bartow. Bartow's art is held in over 100 public collections, and he is known as one of the most well-known and influential Native contemporary artists. Bartow was a member of the Wiyot tribe from northwestern California, and his work shows a lot of influence from the culture of his tribe. However, his Native identity and cultural practices are not at the forefront of his intention behind creation. Bartow was a Vietnam War veteran and a Bronze Star recipient. He suffered from PTSD after returning home from the war and was haunted by the violence he experienced during his time there. He was an addict, turning to drugs and alcohol to cope with the PTSD for many years before eventually getting sober in 1979. In a 2007 interview, he said, "I had buried a lot of monsters with alcoholism and drug abuse, and when they started getting out of the box, I lost the lid and couldn't put it back." This is when he returned to his passion for art, which had been put on hold through his wartime experiences. He started to paint and create sculptures that were reflective of the horrors he was reliving through his PTSD. While his intention with creation was an outlet for his trauma, it is still apparent that his cultural background has influence on the aesthetic look of his art. Depictions of human and animal transformations are at the forefront of much of his work. The idea that the physical and spiritual are tied together and the interdependency between people and animals is a foundational aspect of the Wiyot culture. Because of this, many of Bartow's works depict very animalistic humans or very human-like animals. This is very much apparent in his work, Quiet One. The depiction of this bird with such emotional human-like eyes is striking and captivating. The eyes have a sort of faraway sadness and grief in them that pulls the viewer in, asking them to spend just a few more contemplative moments with the piece than they typically would in a museum setting. The soft and solid blues of the eyes contrast with the warm tones surrounding them, which pulls the viewer into their cool center, inviting them to fall into their emotion. The bird's body is abstract, yet still a classic crow or hawk depiction. The style is familiar to those accustomed to Bartow's work, but the eyes are what make this piece unique. When I first saw this painting, I related to the extremely human look in the bird's eyes and felt that I was looking into a mirror of my own grief. There is little information available on Bartow's intention behind this specific piece, but given the background context of his time in Vietnam, as well as his depictions of the interconnectedness between humans and animals, it is safe to assume that this figure is somewhat of a reflection of his own sadness and grief relating to his PTSD and losses in Vietnam. There is a sort of emptiness in the bird's eyes, showing the depression that comes from dealing with such a heavy mental illness, and there's a deep desperation that is impossible to ignore. There are striking similarities between the eyes in this figure and the eyes of soldiers described as shell-shocked or having a 1,000-yard stare. The viewer can likely project their own feelings and experiences with grief, depression, loss, and PTSD onto this image, just as I imagine Bartow did during its creation. There is a silent scream in the bird's eyes that is reminiscent of how it feels to deal with an entirely mental affliction. Sometimes to look into the eyes of another and see the same hurt you feel is the most human and affirming experience someone can have when they are at their lowest. To see this solidarity in the form of a spiritual animal being brings about the added layer of security that comes from trusting one's place in relation to nature and the animal world.